Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream I do a couple of times a week where we talk about hiring, we talk about job search, we talk about careers, but not just the theory behind these things and how you should do it. We talk about the nitty-gritty reality, the fake jobs, the ghosting, the rejection. What's really going on behind the scenes, what they don't tell you, what they don't like to talk about, and what's best for you. And that's not necessarily playing right into their hand or taking the path the most traveled, the default thing. So that's what we're here. This is primarily a Q&A. So if you're seeing my face, you should see a chat box in the vicinity of my face, regardless of what device you're watching this on. Get in the chat. If you've been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in the chat, ask me questions, let me know what's up with you, what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and I will do my best to help you out. That's what this is all for. This is episode number 89 of Honest HR Nitrous. This is called AI, ATS, remote work, and ghosting. Let's talk about today's job market. So that's what we're here to do. Beyond this title, I have no agenda, no pre-planned monologue or rehearsed thing to say. I'm here simply responding to your questions and comments. That's the whole point. So get in the chat and participate. Let me know what you think about these topics. And before we get started, just a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Membership has its privileges. That thing right there. And also my Patreons, my super thanks donors, and to you, my participants. Thank you for being here. If you weren't here, I wouldn't be here. Let's talk about this. AI, ATS, remote work, and ghosting. Okay, so AI and ATS, I think, are the interesting part of this, certainly. We've seen a rise of these in the last few years, and they are directly related. And what we're seeing with things like HireVue, as an example, is they're combining ATS, applicant tracking software. That's the thing that filters your job application. So when you apply for a job online and you respond to a posted job, it's the thing, the computer system that takes your application, reads it. This is software, so there's no humans involved. It reads your application. It ranks you in the running, and is usually the reason for the fact that you don't get your application seen by a human, because it screens you out before you get to that stage. That's essentially what this does. So applicant tracking system or applicant tracking software, that's what it does. And in recent years, they're combining AI and ATS systems together. So you're getting applicant tracking systems that are intelligent. They have AI built in, and they're using that intelligence, that AI, to make a decision on your application. Okay, so this is what we're seeing. Now, the thing is, how can I put this? It's like you're being judged by a standard, right? And the thing is that in the HR department at a lot of larger organizations, the recruiters and the ATS systems, they are having an effect on the types of employees that are brought into those firms. And, you know, it's meant to be a good thing. And in some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it isn't, because this system and the intelligence behind it, like how they make these value judgments on different candidates, is what is driving the hiring decisions. And it's not necessarily good. It's very, very hard to spot talent. You know, this is a universal truth. Even if you've got the most resources ever, it's still hard to do. Now, recruitment and selection, they're trying to do this on a budget. The role of recruiter is an entry-level role usually. You know, it's not like, you know, only the most senior people with 30 years experience can be recruiters. No, that's not what we're seeing. Everybody's got an opinion on it. And when you train someone in labor laws, that essentially gives them the position to be able to pick employees. That's kind of how this works. They're at least having an influence over it, you know. And, the problem is that these systems, they're really, really not tuned into the things that corporations or business entities are really looking for. This is the thing. They think they are. That's how it's allowed to transpire. They think they are. But they're really not. And in the same way that like AI is not super, super effective at a lot of things yet, it's also super not effective at this. You can make very, very superficial value judgments about people. A human can do this already. And then you can train an AI to do what the human's doing, to make equally poor value judgments about people, and this is what we're seeing, and like, I really feel like a broken record saying this, but you see, the thing is, there's always been two paths to hiring. If you want to get a job, and that is your ambition, there's two paths you can go down. One is the posted job market. One is the hidden job market, for want of a better term, where you don't go through this system. You're not speaking to recruiters. You're not dealing with ATS systems. You're not being judged by an AI. You're being judged by a person, So increasingly, in the last few years, several things have happened that have pushed everyone towards, the hidden job market, towards getting a job through networking, towards things like direct outreach, where you contact the employer and basically say, hey, I'm here, I can do this. If you're looking for that, please let me know, because I'd love to work for you. More people are being pushed in that direction, and rightly so, because that's where 80% of the jobs are, and they're being pushed away from the standard way of hiring, the organization's own recruitment and selection process, meaning recruiters and job applications and things like this, ATS systems. There's been several things that are pushing people in that direction. The first one is things like ghosting, right? It's a very unpleasant experience. It's unprofessional. And, there are legitimate reasons that are driving it, but regardless of how you slice it or justify it, it's unprofessional. It's a turnoff for a lot of candidates, and they find it undesirable to engage in that kind of game. Other things are like fake jobs. Fake jobs have also come in recently. They've always been around, but they've really been amplified in the last 5 years. So that's another thing that's pushing people away, pushing candidates away from the sort of standard official method of getting hired with recruiters and job applications and job postings, right? And AI in ATS systems is now a third thing that's pushing people away from this traditional method of hiring, right? When you're being asked to do job interviews, not just over like teleconference, over like Zoom or Teams or anything like that, but you're being asked to do it on a website where you're not even talking to a real person. You're essentially recording a video of you answering the different job interview questions and things, which is increasingly impersonal and, you could argue, dehumanizing. These are things that are more efficient for the organization, but they're a huge turnoff for candidates. And so it's pushing people away from using the standard method of hiring, the recruitment and selection, right? So that's what I find interesting. A lot of these things, they're sort of combining to all have the same effect, to push people away from the traditional sort of hiring process. The alternative has always been there, that, networking is the way to get jobs. A lot of people, especially young people, they misunderstand what that means. They assume it means I need to know a million people. Incorrect. You don't need to know a single person to do this. They also assume, it's all nepotism or favoritism or cronyism or whatever you want to call it. Incorrect. I mean, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't exist, but that's not what this is. This is something else. It's legitimate, right? Where you basically make your pitch to a hiring manager and say, listen, I do this. I'm great at this. If you're looking for that, if that's what you're looking for, please let me know. I'd love to work for you. I know you guys do this type of work. I live very close by. I'd love to work for you if you're looking for someone like me, something like that. And it goes from there. And the advantage of these methods traditionally have been that they're very human. You're dealing with people. You're not going through some machine where you're being processed like cattle or like a number. It's a very human process. You're reaching out to somebody, and if they happen to be looking for someone like you, and that means if you're going to the appropriate people, right? Then they respond. They say, you know what, there might be some potential, here. I'm not sure yet. Let's talk. This kind of thing. Very, very positive process, generally speaking. So anyway, I have apparently taken it as one of the missions of my YouTube channel to enlighten people about this. If you've never been exposed to this, because a lot of people aren't being exposed to this in school. It's terribly tragic. You're not being taught about this. So when you come out of school, you don't realize that this is a thing. This is how people have always gotten hired. The majority of people have always gotten hired this way. And especially nowadays that AI and ATS and ghosting and fake jobs, it's all pushing people back towards it. It's a good thing to embrace. So I want to encourage people. Helicopter is here. Helicopter says, hello, Helicopter. Thank you. You win the award for being the first person in the chat. So congratulations. That's quite an achievement for today. If you have any questions or you have any complaints about any of this stuff that we're talking about, voice them in the chat and let's get into it. Job search is, it's a very depressing kind of thing. And a lot of that derives from the fact that you're being treated very poorly. It's a very dehumanizing process. It's an exercise in rejection. And it's ironic because you get all that rejection right at the moment when you're essentially most vulnerable. You're between jobs. And for a lot of people, there's that comes with a huge shot to your self-esteem. You're feeling this tall, and that's when you get rejected more than most people will ever be rejected in their lives. You know what I mean? And it hurts. And also, ironically, this is the moment where you have to convince people that you're confident, that you're sure of yourself, that you have value and you believe you have value. It's so ironic how all these things just happen at the same time. It's beautiful, So it's a very, very trying experience. It's very tough for many people. Behringer is here. Thank you for being here. Says, by using AI, does that mean the system sweeps the internet for information about an employee, including social chat groups? It doesn't mean that that's what it does. It could do that, but that's not really what AI does. Like, AI is a tool. It's essentially a fancy version of autocomplete, a very fancy version of autocomplete. Where you could write an app that will do that. It has nothing to do with AI. It'll just go and do the equivalent of a Google search and try and pull information from various places and try and categorize it and display it next to it and next to like all of it in one place, and try and stitch together some shared identity of what a person is based on what's being said about them on the internet, right? Now, the problem with that stuff is that it's very imprecise, right? If you get a bot to do this, for example, if you have a very common name, it can grab somebody else's Facebook profile thinking it's yours because you have the same name or something, and then stitch it all together, and it's not very accurate, right? Usually traditionally it fell to a human, like the recruiter, to do a little bit of research on you, but they wouldn't do that until they were looking at you seriously further along in the process. So it wouldn't be something that they would do initially. It would be something that, they'd look at your application, they'd bring you in for an interview, and then at the point where they're checking references and that kind of stuff, doing background checks, they would also look at you on the internet. So that's traditionally how that stuff worked. AI is enhancing a lot of things to do with information, so it can be used for this. It can be used to automate more of that process, to verify whether it really is the same person or not, make better judgments, things like that. But that has been around for a very long time, ever since the internet really, or ever since social networking came on the scene really. And AI is helping it be a little more efficient, but it's not directly because of AI. Helicopter says, it's a rough job market right now. I got news for you, Helicopter. It's always a rough job market. Even in a boom economy, it's a rough job market, depending on what you're doing. And it's always a good job market, regardless of economic conditions, depending on what you're doing. That's how it's always been. You know, this is the thing, like, you are in competition. I hate to say it, you are in competition with all the other job seekers out there. And, you know, if you are effective at what you do, you can get hired, you know, whereas they maybe can't. Some of them maybe can't, not yet, you know. And that's always the case, right? So I don't pay too much attention to statistics like month by month. You know, I don't really care too much about that stuff. What's more important is what you're doing, what your techniques are, where you're looking, what your approach is, and how you are pursuing leads, basically. Like, I'm not 100% on this, but if we looked it up right now, I don't know what country you're in, Helicopter, or what industry you're in within that country. But if you looked it up right now, I suspect that, you know, the labor market, if you look at economic indicators and things, they're actually not doing too bad now globally, right? It's been a lot worse in the past, you know what I'm saying? So, but that's neither here nor there if you need a job, you know? So what's critical is that you are doing the right things. That's the only thing that matters. Abood says, I am stuck operations and I want to escape it. I knocked all doors, including networking, certificates, networking. I don't know what that means. I feel like it's dead end. I use ChatGPT to customize my CV, oil and gas industry. Okay, that's, unfortunately, that's barely comprehensible to me. I don't really know exactly what you're saying. You know, the problem with a lot of people is they don't understand how networking works. They don't understand what it is. You know, they talk to two people and then promptly conclude that networking is a dead end. It doesn't work like that. So I'm not sure what you're doing, but, you know, don't take my word for anything. What I encourage everyone to do, okay, is go out and do your own research. Okay, don't take my word for anything. If I say something that you find surprising or you think surely that can't be true, go out and do your own independent research and learn what's actually going on out there. Okay, for example, like just the most basic statistic with these things is that 80% of jobs are never posted. Okay, only 20% of jobs are actually posted. So all the jobs out there that you see right now that are posted, all those jobs, that's only 20% of what's actually out there. The other 80% is out there. You can get it. It exists, but you won't discover it by doing an internet job search and looking at job postings. Okay? Now that alone, I think a lot of people, I know a lot of young people, when they first hear this, they think, BS, that can't be true. You know? But it is. Don't take my word for it. Go out and verify. Go ask ChatGPT. Go read articles about this. You know, like, you know, where are the jobs? You know, are all jobs posted? Go and research some of this stuff, you know? And then when you've convinced yourself of the truth, that that is in fact true, you know, then come back and we can explore, you know, how then you go and discover those hidden jobs and how you put yourself forward for them and how you get them. You know what I mean? Different people are at different places along this journey, you know? Now, listen, okay, we could talk about how to apply and get jobs through standard channels. Like if you are playing the game of job postings on the internet, applications and resumes, interviews with recruiters, right? Background checks and all that, references, you know, and then job offers. If you are in that world and that's where you want to be, and you realize that, okay, this is only 20% of all the offers and it's usually not the good jobs, but that's still the game you want to play, that's fine. We can talk about that. By the way, incidentally, for anyone who's interested, I have a course that talks about that. Okay. All my advice is here for how to get those jobs, get those posted jobs, right? It also talks about how to get the hidden jobs. So you get that course, you get everything. And I show you how to do all of this with templates and processes and everything. Okay. So that's always there. There's a link in the description box below if you are interested and you want to check that out. You know what I mean? And you can do it that way. Now, the thing is, for some people, they can win at that game. Okay. This is a place where they put 800 candidates on a level playing field and have them compete against each other. And then they select the handful that they like, maybe 5, 6, no more than 10. And then they interview those candidates. They whittle it down to 1, and then they hire them. So you're getting 1 out of about 800 candidates who applied. Now, some people can do this. They can play this game. It's a numbers game. They can go head to head against 800 people and win. Their entire background is suited to doing that job. They have everything that recruiters would want, all the external signs, and they fit into that box. So if that's you, you can do this. And the way it works is a numbers game. You take your best shot and you apply. And the odds are that you're not going to get it. You might have a 1% chance of getting a callback or something like that. If there's 800 people, you statistically have a 1 in 800 chance of, or 5 in 800 chance of getting an interview. You know what I mean? Statistically. That's assuming you did as good a job as everyone else on average, right? You know what I mean? So the odds are is that if you do like 1, 2, or 3 jobs, you do 3 applications, you're probably not going to get hired. But if you do 1,000 applications, yeah, you should get hired. Statistically, that's what it's going to take. It depends not on you. Like, it does depend on you, but it also depends on many other factors, including your competition, right? And it includes other factors like what the employer is looking for that they have kept secret, that they haven't disclosed, right? Things like this, okay? So some people can play that game, and you can do it, if you are suited to that. If you don't fit into that tight little compartment, you have a big current work gap, or you're a generalist, you've had jobs like all over the place. You haven't followed a specific career path. You haven't specialized in something. You've kind of been all over the place. You may not fit into that little compartment that they're looking for, that they're biased towards. Right? So if that's you, it might look discouraging because they're, what do recruiters always ask? They ask for years of experience. How many years of experience do you have? Now, you may have 25 years of experience working in jobs, but only 5% of that experience is relevant to getting this job. So you're going to get always beaten by the next person who's got 25 years experience working in this job. You know what I mean? Things like this. That's just an example. Does that mean you can't get hired? Absolutely not. It just means that you go the more common way through networking. You go outside of these systems. You reach out to hiring managers, especially, or people that can help you in general. People that have the power to hire you. And you connect with them on a human level. Not necessarily in person, but you connect with them just outside of this kind of rigid structure. And people hire who they like. They hire who they see potential in, That's how that works. Behringer says, I find myself competing with just out of college grads. I thought my work experience would be an advantage, but I'm finding companies prefer new hires they can mold over experience. For certain jobs, yes. Yeah, I remember being in the role like that decades ago, where you're essentially exploited. And they intentionally are looking for fresh meat. They're looking for kids just out of school, especially people that have no prior corporate job experience or career job experience. because these kids don't know what's normal. They don't know what's appropriate. They don't know what's typical. So the company can tell you, oh, this is normal. Oh, it's totally normal that, we're expecting you to work the midnight shift with Tuesday and Wednesday off, which I did for a few years, but yet still expect you to come in for 5 p.m. for a meeting every couple of weeks that we're not going to pay you for. That's totally normal. Every company does it. That's what I was told. That's one of many examples. This is a well-known thing, right? You're being exploited, and they're taking advantage of your innocence. Now, you can look at it two ways. You could look at it the way I've just framed it, as a bad thing, or you could look at it, I suppose, in the sense of, well, you're putting in your time, you're getting your foot in the door, you're showing you can hack it, and then that enables you to have other opportunities to move upward within that organization where it's a bit more reasonable and they compensate you a bit better. You know what I mean? So you can look at it a couple of different ways, right? But this is definitely a known thing. This is a really well-known thing, right? That you're describing. Not everybody is cut out for that. That might be fine for some people. Some people are okay with that. Others, they got a problem with it. And others, it's not really what they're looking for. Maybe they're not right out of school. Like you, Berenger. You're not out of school. You have some experience. You're not looking to start at the bottom again. If they're hiring fresh grads over you, simply because they can pull the wool over their eyes, but with you, they probably can't. You know what I mean? Like, these are obviously not a fit for you. You deserve something better, something where they can use your value. Something the kids right out of school can't do. You know what I mean? They would not be very good in that role. They just don't have the grounding that you do. They don't have the experience you do. You know what I mean? It will take them a few years to learn that. Then they might be able to do it. But you've got it now. You know what I'm saying? So the problem is that a lot of these requirements, and we all know this, I think everybody knows this, a lot of the requirements are just arbitrary for a lot of things. You see, this is a side effect of them getting like 800 people applying for a job. You can afford to raise that bar very, very high. In fact, you need to filter out most people. You can't hire all 800. You can only hire one person. So you're going to have to eliminate 799. So, you do that by whatever means necessary. You do it with the technical requirements. That's the first thing. You then do it with the interviews, like what they're like as a person, if there's any attitude issues or expectation issues or whatever, or red flags in their past. You eliminate them based on that. But then you still got a lot of perfectly qualified, high potential people that are in the running. You're still talking to like 10 of them or whatever. You've got to find ways of eliminating. So they just create a bunch of artificial stuff, And it's also a thing that has that's a well-known thing where one of the things that some companies are now doing is they're intentionally making the application process extremely long and complicated and convoluted and labor intensive to try and filter out people. Their reasoning is that, we're going to make this application process painful. It's going to take an hour to apply for this job. We're going to make you fill out all kinds of forms and do all kinds of tests and answer all kinds of questions, right? And the idea is that, the people that stick that out and do all that stuff, they're demonstrating that they're serious about this job. A lot of people will just give up. It's too much trouble. So they abandon the process. They don't apply. And that filters out the people that, weren't really that serious to begin with. That's the reasoning we're seeing. We're seeing things like this now, right? They're finding artificial ways of, filtering people out. The people that gave up on the application, does that necessarily mean that those people would have been inferior in the role? No. Maybe they were in high demand and they didn't need to do that kind of thing. Who knows? Right? Maybe they didn't do it because in the meantime, another employer called them with an offer. You know what I mean? So, you know what I'm saying? Like this, a lot of this stuff is just arbitrary, and it leads to Once again, if it wasn't clear in the first place, it reiterates how this process is very serendipitous. It's based on numbers, it's based on random chance, and it's based on serendipity, where you get hired. Serendipity means, like, if you don't know, it means, what does it mean? It means like something wonderful happening by accident, just a coincidence, That's what this process is. They just happen to be looking for the thing that you just happen to have, It wasn't that you're superior to all the other candidates. It's just these people, they just happen to be looking for the things that you have, by chance. And you stumbled across that situation. You were in the right place at the right time. And you got hired, It's a numbers game. You do the best you can, but then you throw a lot of things at the wall for something to stick. I hate those expressions, but that is the best way to describe it. Anyway, there's 16 people here. Let me know what your comments are. Get in the chat. Let me know what's going on. I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to help you with stuff. If you have any questions about this process or anything specific, please let me know. I've been speaking very generally about stuff so far. I'd like to be able to kind of refine it down, maybe zone in on something and clear something up for somebody. Behringer says, good point about job applications. I hadn't thought about it like that. I know I've been seeing a lot of irritating application processes lately. Yeah, listen, part of the way to do a job search campaign, okay, is you don't just do one thing. You don't just apply for posted jobs. You do several things, okay? Like certainly 3 things. So applying for posted jobs, okay, fair enough. Keep doing that. But don't have that be the only thing you do. Learn about things like direct outreach, okay? You can learn about it with me, with my course is the proper way to do it to get the best result. You could ask ChatGPT about it, like say, what is direct outreach? How does one apply for a job through direct outreach? And do research, online or, through any other channel on that stuff and learn about it. Who are the people that can help me? How do I discover these people? What do I say to them? How do I reach them? These are all components of learning that, right? If you want to learn that with me, once again, check out my course because I cover that. The thing is, you can't cover all that effectively in a 5-minute video. Even in an hour, you can't just lay it all out. If someone's never done this before, you have to sort of break everything down and explain how everything works. And therefore, now that you know how it all works, here's what you do, and here's why you do it that way, right? That's the thing. It's quite labor intensive to teach someone this from scratch. So that's why I can't put it into videos effectively. It would be like a series of videos, which is what this is. It's a course. It becomes a course. It's not a video. Now I have some free stuff. If you want to get, if this is a totally new concept to you, it sounds intriguing, but you don't know anything about it. I have one video that might be able to help. That's linked in the description box below. It's just a free video on my YouTube channel. Anybody can watch it. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay, so check that out if you want to see what it looks like, get a taste of it. Okay, that's the kind of thing that you can do, and it will open up a lot of options for you. So check that out. Anyway, listen, I'm here just monologuing. Get in the chat. We've had a few awesome people that are asking questions and things. Behringer and Abood and Helicopter. Get in the chat and let's, if I can help you, that's what I'm here to do. I'm just going to adjust my camera for 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Valerie, or Valérie, depending on if you're French, says, I have advertising project management experience training staff. I had a few interviews past the AI bots, but no job yet. They hired from within. Hiring departments like my resume to keep for future jobs. Okay, yeah, that's not unusual. Just if you are working right now, if you are in this role, where you're training staff in a advertising project management environment, there's a lot of more promising leads probably internally to your industry that you can access, that are more promising than sort of applying to job postings cold. You know what I'm saying? Or if they're in your industry and in your hometown, there's a chance that you might be connected to the people that are behind that job posting, that opportunity. You deal with somebody at a different company that deals with them, something like that. You have a second degree connection or something, right? In which case, that may be a way to get in, right? To get that personal recommendation from someone that they trust, because they will generally want to check out those people first rather than checking out a complete stranger, right? Which is what you are when you apply through standard channels. You apply for the job through a job posting, right? And also, just being on the inside of any industry, you have access to all the people in that industry. You can connect with them, and you contact them and you say, hi, I'm a project manager with this firm that maybe they're a competitor, or maybe they're, another player in the same industry, right? They could even be like a supplier or a vendor or distributor or whatever of, their company, right? So you get that sort of credibility right up front, and you can do informational interviews, you can do direct outreach, you can say, listen, I'm looking to make a change. I'm looking to do something more like this. I understand that that's what you do. If ever you're looking for someone that can help you with this, please let me know. Like that's the most basic form of it, that anyone can do, right? And you send that out almost like a template, right? But the key is being able to go to the right people, knowing who the right people are. They should be people that are above your level, right? They're at least one level above you. Those are the people that can help you, right? People at your level, generally speaking, can't help you. They're in the same situation as you. People below you can't help you. It's people at at least one level above you. So the level of your boss and up, those are the people that have the power to hire you. Those are the people that have influence. Those are the people that you should be connecting with, and connecting with in a very specific way. Abood says, I work at operations department. I got exposed to many projects and I want to join the projects team. I got a PMP and I got engineering degree, trying hard, but still no results. Okay. Well, I really don't know much about your situation beyond this paragraph, but generally speaking, soft skills are the reason why people get hired. I hate to say it, Abood, but there are many, many people with the technical qualifications. As far as organizations are concerned, for the worker level and the professional level, they're a dime a dozen. They're very common. I have an engineering degree. You have an engineering degree. There are many people out there that have engineering degrees. Just having an engineering degree does not mean that, we should talk because we'd like to hire you. It's like, no, you can find a lot of people with engineering degrees that are looking for a job, right? But why should they pick you as opposed to somebody else with an engineering degree, right? That's the big question. Now, a big part of the answer is going to be your soft skills, okay? Because you and I, like when you're talking to the hiring manager, you and I, we get along. We have the same communication style. We click as people. You don't find me off-putting. I'm someone that you would want to work with every day. And let's face it, if you hire me, you're going to be working with me every day. So, if you don't like me, if we don't get along, or we have problems communicating or working together, that's going to be a real big issue, right? Instead of hiring you with the engineering degree, they'll hire someone else with the engineering degree that they do get along with. You know what I'm saying? So having personal charisma, the ability to meet people and they kind of instantly like you, that's really important. Now, the great thing is that things like charisma, communication skills, interpersonal skills, conversational skills, all that stuff, these are all things that are learned. It's not a matter of being born with it. It's a skill like any other that you learn. So if you want your career to take off, and you want to be considered for higher level positions, you want to, open up doors and stuff like that, work on your soft skills. That's probably the biggest thing you can do. Apart from like learning how to get jobs where they are and how to pursue them. If you wanted to work on yourself to make yourself more attractive so they pick you, work on your soft skills. It's all about soft skills, It's really annoying from the perspective of a technical person, and trust me, I know where you're coming from if this is you, that because you don't really respect that stuff. You think like, I've got an engineering degree. Do you have any idea what that means? Like how bright you have to be and the things you need to know to be able to say that, that's quite an accomplishment. And like, really, you're going to pick somebody else over me because, they smiled more or something? Like, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to you because you don't understand how people interoperate, right? You need to learn that stuff, right? You need to start respecting this stuff. You need to start improving yourself in these areas, right? Maybe you're doing that. I don't know. I'm not talking about you personally because I don't know. But I'm saying in general, right? This is a blind spot that a lot of technical people have fallen into and continue to fall into every day. And they wonder why things aren't happening for them, They don't realize that it's not all about your technical skills. Yes, that's a component, but it's only one of several things you need for you to be a successful, productive employee. Now, usually, not always, but usually managers and people that are in a position to hire people, they know this, whereas you might not. And that's where the disconnect is happening, Gokhan, is that how you say that? Gokhan says, they say that half of white-collar workers will lose their jobs due to artificial intelligence by 2030. What do you think about that? What should people do about that? What would be the best strategy? Okay, Gokhan, here's the truth. You need to panic. It will be the end of the world. No one will have a job. No one will have any money. And computers and robots will enslave us. Okay? That is what is going to happen. I have predicted it. Okay? So what you need to do now is sell all your possessions, get out in the street, run around naked, and panic. Scream at the moon. Because it's all going to hell in a handbasket. Okay, that's what you need to understand. Gawkin, my friend Gawkin, don't be fooled. Now listen, I'm not asking you to take my word at anything. All I'm asking you to do is look at history, okay? How many major disruptive things, like technological things, have come in and completely reshaped society, human society, like in the last 100 years. There's been many, right? I've seen at least 2 of those myself. I've lived through it. I remember a time people did business without a computer on their desk, okay? Not to date myself, but that's when I started, Nobody knew how to use a computer. It was like working in a hydroponic center or a data center. It was like this weird thing that only strange people in lab coats could do, right? And you know what? Everybody predicted exactly the same thing. They predicted the end of the world. Everybody would be out of a job, right? Because computers could do everything by themselves and they could do it like 1,000,000 times faster than a person. Why would you ever get a person to do it when you can get a computer, right? The internet did the same thing. Information is free. It's going to be the end of the world. There'll be no more news. There'll be no more music. There'll be no more anything, right? And what happens every single time? Well, the first thing that happens is that not everybody, but some people panic and they say it's going to be the end of the world. The world will be over. We'll all be living in a dystopia, right? That's the first thing they say. Okay, first they ignore it. Okay, that's the first thing they do. Then they panic, right? Some people panic, and they rabble rouse. They manage to influence people they're very impressionable to thinking this is the end of the world. And then what happens in the end? Nothing. Life goes on. We have slightly different tools. things work a slightly different way, but generally, it's better. You know? When the automobile came in, right? Think of all the horses they got rid of. Think of all the people who knew things like animal husbandry. They knew how to take care of horses. You know, all the supply chain for like feeding the horses, taking care of the horses, all the vets, everything. Huge industries were obliterated, right? But they were replaced with the automotive industry, the oil and gas industry. You know, they built networks of highways and, you know, things like, and in the end, it was better off for everyone. You know, there's always change, but you swing with it, you know? Sometimes it's easier said than done, and it does affect people, a few people, in a major, major way that's bad temporarily. But at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. You don't have to panic, especially if you're young. You're going to be fine, you know? That's all I can say. Do I have a crystal ball? No, but this is what I do know, and you can verify it, you know? So you tell me, is this going to be different from every other innovation that we've ever made since the dawn of time? Or is it going to be just like all the other things that shaped the world even more significantly than this? Right? You tell me that. Okay. Thank you for being in the chat. If you are participating, if you are here, thank you. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. And hopefully I'm not like laying it on too thick. Okay? Gawkin, you are awesome. Okay? And, you know, you're asking a very natural question, you know, so, you know, it's good. It's good to speak up and it's good to address these things, you know, get some answers, go observe things, but don't just believe panic mongers. You know, you could go on YouTube, you can go on social networking. What they've done is they've taken the idea of news. News is a very negative thing because news, when it's a negative thing, people are more interested. It's like, what? Is this something I need to panic about? Right? Good news doesn't really travel. It's bad news that travels fast, like when it comes to reporting the news. So social networking is basically that on Nitrous. It's like 10x that. So the way to get people to pay attention is to predict bad things, you know, and panic monger, you know, and everyone does this. I have felt the temptation myself. I try not to do that, but, you know, I see other people in my space doing the same thing. It's like, oh my God, is this the end of everything? And then they get like 1 million views. You know, it's tempting, but, you know, it's not true. It's sensationalism. Okay, what would be the best strategy? The best strategy is try and look at where things are going as much as you possibly can. And then don't bury your head in the sand, you know, be open-minded, embrace new things as they come. You know, some things are sort of experimental. They're just for enthusiasts. They're on the bleeding edge, right? But then things get more mainstream, you know, and that's where you should start paying attention and check them out and see if you could use them. Some things aren't ready yet for everyone, but, you know, other things, there's a new way of doing things. There's a new resource available, you know. Check it out, learn it, embrace it, you know, and, you know, the world will never leave you behind. Hello to Bogdan. Helicopter says, people hire for personality over technical skills usually. Well, that's what it may seem. It's that they have the technical skills and they've got the personality traits, right? That's what's really going on. Having the technical skills is a prerequisite to even be in the running, right? But once you're in the running, the tiebreaker is going to be the personality stuff, right? The soft skills. Bogdan says, I've been having an interview. I used your interview guidance low key. Okay. It was so useful. I hope it's a good result, really. Okay, well, it sounds like it's going good, I guess. I have a tendency to monologue too much, especially being technical. Yeah. Hello. Yep. Abood says, nice points. We'll work on that. Thank you. You're welcome, Abood. Hopefully that's useful for you. Berenger says, one question I see is, why did you leave your last job? I left due to a toxic work environment and a pathological liar supervisor. Obviously, I can't say that. What should I say? Great question. Great question. Okay, I want to make sure. Oh, we've got a lot of questions here. Okay, time for me to catch up. Okay, so job interview question. Why did you leave your last job? Right? Everyone loves that. It's like they're asking you a very personal, very direct question. Why did you leave your last job? Now, I'm going to say something before we get into this. And that is that always remember that what you did with some other third party is none of their business. Okay? Always remember that. They don't have a right to know anything about what you do with somebody else. You can choose to voluntarily disclose it if you wish, but you're not obligated to. There's no law that says that you have to disclose this. Okay? Right? The other thing, what's going on here, there's a couple of things going on. First of all, maybe the last boss you had at your last job was a psychopath. They were also coincidentally an idiot, okay? And you're a tremendously valuable employee that can do great things and make a lot of money for the company or save a lot of money for the company. Like either way, you add a lot of value. But this person was too stupid to recognize that or to use you correctly. You had a PhD and they assigned you to dig ditches. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? And then they complained that you couldn't dig ditches as fast as a person who's an actual ditch digger, so they fired you. You know what I mean? Like, does that mean you're a bad employee? Of course not. It means that person was a moron. Now, the other thing that's going on is, why are they asking this question? What strategically why are they wanting to know this, right? Well, they're trying to make value judgments about you. They're trying to assess you as a candidate. Now, what's going on is they're trying to get to know you without actually putting in the time to get to know you. So they're making snap judgments about you based on stereotypes. One of the things that they are trained to reason is that if you were fired from a previous job, that means statistically the likelihood of you being fired from this job if they hired you goes up, right? So it has nothing to do with who you are. It has nothing to do with the mitigating circumstances. If they find out you're fired, they conclude that you'll probably get fired from this job too if we hire you, right? You and I both know that's far from sound reasoning, right? That's very, very flimsy. But yet, that's how they think, okay? So that's what's going on. That sets the stage for why they're asking this question and how they're going to interpret your answer, okay? And keeping in mind, you don't have to disclose anything if you don't want to. So here's the deal. If you were laid off, you could say you're laid off, especially if you were laid off with a bunch of other people at the same time. That is further evidence that there's nothing wrong with you. You're a perfectly good employee, right? So even if your previous job did end like that, they can't say, oh, you're a bad employee. You're a high-risk employee. If you left, this is more of a gray area. Depending on how you frame it, it's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that you were a bad employee. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a very flimsy thing, even for them, right? But the problem is that if you say this, if you disclose this without any background information or any reasoning behind it, they can conclude that you're the type of person that quits things. And if that's the case, as evidenced by your past, if they were to hire you, there's a higher likelihood you would quit this job if they hired you, right? And that means you're a high-risk employee. That means they probably will not want to pick you, okay? On the other hand, if you left, but you say, listen, I was ready to do more. I was ready to work in a situation where I could apply these skills. I could really bring my abilities and my knowledge where it comes to this, into adding value, where I could work with people that, it was much more interesting. It was much more high level, whatever. And that's why I'm here, because this job has all of that. This is a perfect fit for me, and this is the type of situation I'm looking to move into. So that's why I'm here. So like, okay, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad employee, right? So it depends on how you frame the answer if you left. The problem is that if you were fired or you were let go for cause, okay? Now you and I both know you could be let go by a retard, you know, someone who's an idiot. They didn't see the value in front of them, and it makes you look bad because you were let go when really you were a great employee. Maybe you had a problem with the ethics of what they were doing and they didn't like being called on that. They fired you, you know. So the thing is, it looks bad when you say I was fired, right? And the other thing is that the interviewer is not really looking to get the full story because they recognize that they will never know the full story. You could be lying about everything here, you know, about all the reasons, right? So the problem is, as soon as you say I was fired or I was let go for cause, a lot of times you've eliminated yourself. So for that reason, I recommend you don't say that, even if it's true. I would recommend you say, well, I left, you know, or something like that, right? And there are, depending on your situation, I mean, you don't want to do a total lie, like a bold-faced lie, but it's how you articulate it. Like, for example, let's say that you took the job and they advertised that this was the role and you started in that role, but over time they changed the role into something else that you didn't want to do. It had nothing to do with what you signed on for. And you weren't particularly talented at that. Like, it wasn't something that you were even interested in doing, but they made you do it. And surprise, surprise, you weren't like a natural. You weren't enthusiastic about it. So they let you go. You know what I mean? Maybe it was something like that, you know? So you could say, listen, you know, when I took the role, it was for this role. I was passionate about it and I had a lot of value to bring to that role. But over time, it morphed into something completely unrecognizable, something that I had no interest in doing, that didn't really speak to any of my strengths, so it just didn't work out, and I left. You know, if you can say something like that, I would phrase it like that. But the problem is, you need to avoid saying, I was fired or I was let go, because they're going to make judgments about you that are not necessarily true. You know, that's the problem, right? So you got to be very diplomatic at this, or you might as well get up and walk out of the interview because you didn't get it. You know what I mean? So that's what's going on. You know, that's this question. That's why it's a dangerous question that you need to rehearse and you need to figure out in advance what your explanation is going to be and how much detail to give and how to phrase it. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, where do we leave off here? Let's see here. So that was Behringer. Helicopter, whoever is emojiing with me, you rock. Okay. Bogdan, I love live streams. Need to add notifications for the channel. Well, thank you. Catrone said this things people reprofile. What? Behringer says time-saving tools aren't time-saving. They just give you more tasks to do to fill your workday. Bogdan, how to stop monologue? LOL. Well, I'm answering someone's question, so I know I can kind of go off a bit, but just be patient. I'll get to if you had a question. I think Bogdan is talking to other people here, so I'm not sure. Helicopter, what do you mean monologue? Okay, practice your about me and keep it around 1 minute. Bogdan, plus low key, one more thing is it's to ask about hours of work and all kind of more, let's say toxic ones a little bit just to be a pure assertive. Okay, I don't know if you're talking to somebody else, you just kind of lost me on that one, like you talk too much by yourself. I'm passionate about philosophy and sometimes I go too much on tangents. Okay, that's the whole monologue thing. Thanks, that was a very reassuring answer. Hopefully you're talking to me. I'm not sure if you are. If you are, thank you. Valerie says, how do you answer the question, what was your last job and duties? I had a temporary job to pay the bills, waiting for a project manager job. Less duties, but paid the bills. Valerie, I can't tell you how to answer that exact question for you, but here's what I will say. Always remember, when you go to a job interview, it's not a deposition. You're not in a court of law, okay? So that means that within certain ethical boundaries, we can say, massage the truth. What do you want them to know is your last job? If the technical answer to that question, is that you did some really menial job just to make ends meet or something, but that's not who you are, and it's not your capabilities, and you don't want people to get the impression that that's all you're qualified for, because you're not. I understand. These people are operating on superficialities. They're operating on appearances. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not taking the time to get to know you properly. They're trying to get to know you without getting to know you. Like I said earlier, they're trying to do the Cliff's Notes on it, like the TLDR version of who you are, right? And the problem is that if you answer these questions correctly from a technical point of view, it would give a very misleading impression of who you are and what your capabilities are. They're not asking the right questions. What they should have been asking was, what was your last relevant career job or something that, was related to this job in question that you're going for? Maybe something like that, right? Because if the last job you did was like, you worked as a maid for 2 months just to make ends meet or something, to add another revenue stream for yourself or something, you know what I mean? Like, that's going to give the wrong impression. So you have to be conscious of that, right? What you're doing is you're delivering a sales pitch for yourself. That's what a job interview is. You're saying, here's what's awesome about me. Here's what I can do for you. Forget about all those candidates you've been talking to and hire me for these reasons. That's what you're there to do. And these questions, these are a detour. They're a distraction. You need to give these questions a quick kiss-off answer, like that satisfies the interviewer, but get off them quickly so you can get back to making a pitch for yourself, giving them reasons why you're awesome and why they should pick you. So I wouldn't judge you too harshly if you answered that question not technically correct, but you spoke to what they were trying to get at. They're trying to see who you are, really. They're judging you by your last job. So pick the job, you know what I mean, that does that most accurately and most effectively, Now, I understand everybody's going to have their own opinion on that. That's fine. Hey, listen, you do you. We all draw that line in the sand in slightly different places. All I'm saying is that your competitors are going to be drawing it in different places too. Why should you not get the job when you're clearly awesome for it, and those jackasses get it when they, are less suitable than you? You know what I mean? That's another consideration. So listen, I'm not trying to enforce my sense of ethics on people. I'm just saying that's the situation. You decide how you're going to operate within that. Abood says, is a star method a good way to answer the interview questions? Yes and no. Depends what question. They're the absolute standard way you would answer a behavioral question. Hopefully you know what that is. That's when they ask you, tell me about a time, you did something. Tell me about a time you dealt with conflict. Tell me about a time you showed creativity. The way you're going to answer those is in the star format, right? But it's not a good way to answer, tell me about yourself, or what are your salary expectations, or why do you leave your last job, or what is your weakness, or how do you handle stress, or where do you see yourself in 5 years, or any of those other questions. You're not going to answer in the star format for those. It will not be great. Serge says, I'm so glad to see your content is still so actual. Okay, that's good. I'm a very actual type person, and I'm actually here. and your mind even sharper through all these years, going to watch her. You mean I'm more upset? I think that's kind of what's actually happening. That comes from years and years of talking about the same stuff on YouTube. You know, that maybe it's a side effect. I'm going towards my long-term goal of having a vein pop in my head when I'm on, like live on the air, and then I keel over, and then it's all over, you know? If you're going to go out with a bang. That's what I say. Going to watch your videos before going to the top job propositions in IT region this time. Okay, well, best of luck to you, Serge. I hope it works out. And I got a feeling that you're going to do okay, regardless of how this turns out. Sooner or later, you are going to come out on top. Bogdan says, Q, the asking of more assertive questions, like hours and how I'm going to work, may show you're more of a responsible person. No, that doesn't work like that. Listen, you've met other people before, right? Do you like it when they get right in your face and they ask you a really awkward question? They put you on the spot? You know? How many times today have you gone to the bathroom? You know, something like that. Like, I don't know. Do you enjoy that when they ask you sort of tough questions, right? That aren't super fun to answer. And, you know, you don't really feel like answering questions like that. You know, it's kind of a little bit weird, a little bit embarrassing, you know, a bit awkward. You can't really say what you want to say, you know, or whatever, right? Well, recruiters are people too. Although it's sometimes hard to see that. They don't like it either. And part of making a pitch for yourself, especially to a hiring manager, especially because they're the ones that are going to be working with you if you get hired, is they need to feel good about you. They need to feel like this is going to be pleasant. It's not going to be awkward. It's not going to be, you know, unpleasant or off-putting. You know, I want to work with people that I get along with, that are easy to work with. You know, I do not want to work with somebody that's going to, you know, make me feel awkward, or that doesn't seem to realize that asking awkward questions are not good. Like, that's not what makes you look good, you know? Right? So that is prioritized above, like, oh, I need to know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask that so I get an answer. You know what I mean? Even the questions you ask them in an interview, like, you know, when they say, do you have any questions for us? It's a performance, you know? It's not about what you really want to know about the job. There'll be plenty of time for that later if they give you an offer and it works out. There'll be plenty of time to answer all your questions then, right? Or if it's a really big concern, you can ask those questions after they've given you an offer, you know, and you want to check a few things and see how you feel about it, you know, before accepting, right? But now is not the time to, like, you know, say, I really want to know this, so I'm going to ask it, and it might not be fun or welcoming or endearing to ask it. The entire job interview is a performance on your part. You're being judged for the entire thing. And at the end of the interview, when they ask you if you have any questions, that's your last chance to make a good impression, right? So you ask questions that signal good things about you. They signal you care about the job. The questions you ask, that you choose to ask, they signal that you know how to do the job, right? Things like this, right? Instead of, like, putting them on the spot, making them feel weird. Like, there's some questions like that say, like, you know, if you were CEO of this company, what problem would you fix? And that means they have to admit that the company has all kinds of problems, and this is what, you know, what they would do to fix the place where they work. They're not going to do that. You're putting them on the spot, right? So that's what's going on with that question. Where do we leave off here? Okay, let's see here. This has been moving up, and it's moving back. I don't know if people are, like, deleting their own comments or something. I'm not sure, but it's moving all over the place. Now I got to find where I left off. Okay, so that was right at the end. That was Bogdan. It says, asking of more assertive questions like hours and how I'm going to be. Yeah, so there we go. So that's that. So we've reached the end of the chat. If you have any other questions for me, get in the chat now. There's 30 people here. Thank you for being here. If you want to go deeper, you want to learn how to get hired, and you want to get hired, check out that course. There's a link in the description. It's my Get Hired course. It's where all my advice is. And it will do two things for you. It'll teach you how to get hired in the posted job market. It'll also teach you how to get hired in the hidden job market. And it's tailored for introverts, people that don't know a million people, that don't enjoy talking on the phone, things like this, right? So check that out if that's what you're looking for. A lot of people have taken it. Very popular course. So if you're looking to go deeper with me, get that. Okay, we got some more stuff here. Abood says, can I ask in the interview, like, is there training or course you would like me to take? Does it show initiative? It's not about showing initiative. Okay. I don't think that's the end of the world to ask that. It doesn't feel awkward, but it's not the best question to ask. It signals that you might not be qualified, or you might feel you're not fully qualified, by asking things like that. That's one of the questions I was talking about when I said there's plenty of time later to ask that stuff, okay? Either they pick you or they don't, okay? Is asking a question like that going to lead to people picking you? Probably not, because you're asking about a potential weakness you have. The weakness is that you're not trained enough. Would you like me to take more courses? Like, do I need to take more courses? Like this kind of thing. It's like, why are you thinking that way? Do you feel like you need to take more courses? It's bringing up that issue. So, I mean, listen, it's totally a judgment call, but in my opinion, I would not ask that question first. I would ask other things before, asking those questions. Bogdan says, what would be some good questions? Somebody asked it. Plus, do you think you shouldn't force questions? Yeah, you shouldn't force. Listen, like, what you want to do in a job interview is you want them to like you, okay? Now, if you put them on the spot and create awkwardness, that's the opposite of trying to get them to like you, right? You want them to have a fun experience. When you walk out of the room, you want them to think, wow, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I'm a little bit sad that's over, That's what you want. So anything that doesn't contribute to that, you shouldn't do, right? So ask yourself, is that what you're going to get by asking, different questions? Now, what questions should you ask? Okay, here's what I would say. If they say, do you have any questions for us? Usually that means you can certainly ask 3 questions, okay? Possibly 4, okay? The last question you should always end with is, where do we go from here? Right? For a variety of reasons. First of all, it's nice to know that, but, are you going to notify me? Should I check a website? Whatever. When will you make a decision? Stuff like that. So that's nice to know. But also it signals that you care. I want to know where this goes. Because sometimes people go to an interview and by the end of the interview, they don't care anymore. It's like, this clearly is not what I'm interested in, So I really don't care where this goes because it doesn't look like what I thought it was, right? So you ask that question, it at least shows that, you're interested in seeing if you get this, you care, right? Okay. Now, before you end on that, you should ask 2 or possibly 3 questions. Okay. Now, one question you could ask is, like, I was going to do a video on this. Like, what are recruiters looking for? They're looking for someone who can do the job. Okay. So if you ask, like here's kind of a shortcut. If you know the toughest aspect of doing the job and you say it before they do, that signals that you understand this job. You know how to do the job, right? So if you ask questions to the effect of, like, what's, for the person in this role, what would be the immediate priority for them, to accomplish or to work on? What would be your expectations for them in the first 30, 60, 90 days? That's a good question to ask, right? They also want someone who is going to come in and they're not going to create issues. They're going to work well with everyone. They're going to get over the learning curve. They're going to fit right in. They're going to interoperate with everyone properly and work out. So You can ask them a question about the working environment or about the other people they're going to be working with. Here in this team, what is a sign of a great employee? How do employees support each other here? Something like that. That shows you're thinking about that stuff. That shows that's where your head's at. When I come in, I want this to work out. So I'm asking for, what would help me work out, get along with everyone, interoperate with everyone. These are great things to signal to them, right? It's you're asking the right questions, right? You could go on about this sort of thing, right? There's more questions. I've done videos on this. You'd ask a lot of different types of questions. Some more neutral things are what's the biggest challenge going to be for this role going forward? What's going to be the biggest challenge for this organization going forward? That I could perhaps contribute to, things like this, right? Those are all good questions. Where do we leave off here? So hopefully that answers your question, Bogdan. Valerie says, thanks for your employment information. Helpful. You're absolutely welcome, Valerie. And thank you for being here. And I wish you all the best. KZ259 says, hey, Bill, it's always a pleasure to see you on the stream, sir. Absolutely. And same to you, KZ. That reminds me of the AZ5 button, on the Chernobyl thing. You hit that and then things explode. It's like a feature. I have to sign off pretty soon. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Hopefully you got something out of this. I do this stream a couple times a week. So I'll be back on Friday talking about this stuff. If you have any more questions, I wish you all the best. Always remember, chin up. If you're between jobs right now, times are like this are never easy. They're stressful for everybody, and you're not alone. And you have help. You have resources and people that can help you. So if you do have questions, whatever, I'm live again on Friday. Come back and we can talk about it, whatever you're wondering about, and go from there. Thanks very much, you guys. You're awesome. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon. Cheers.